This is the 5-Minute Writing Corner with Troy Bernardo. I once had a writing partner who told me I had to stop writing with so much dialogue because that makes a piece more of a play or a film. And I gotta be honest, I completely disagree with him. My pieces weren't entirely dialogue, but I relied on them. Right? Hemingway's short story Hills Like White Elephants, which I'll put down in the description below, is a masterpiece that's almost exclusively filled with dialogue. It's something I rely heavily on in my writing, and many other writers do too. And I remember that reading The Great Gatsby in high school, I remember disliking it solely because there was so little dialogue in the first chapter, and really, honestly, it's pretty minimally utilized for the entirety of the book. In reality, talking to me is how things happen in a story. Sure, you can have fist fights, you can have wonderful world building and actions that define a character, but we spend most of our day talking either with ourselves or with the people around us. That's how things happen in real life. So today, let's talk about crafting meaningful and realistic dialogue. Specifically, I'll talk about some tools and ideas I use when I'm writing dialogue. So let's go ahead and start with rule number 1, and it's one that surprises a lot of my students, really. I don't know why. The first, and I think honestly probably the most important rule, begins all the way at the beginning of our writing, right? And that starts specifically with the rough draft. Remember, the first draft of anything isn't going to be good, so don't get discouraged after you take your rough draft out after a week and give it a read over, right? Don't be discouraged by the fact that it's probably not going to be very good. The tool here is just really to read the piece out loud, specifically the dialogue. That's the most important thing to really read out loud, but the whole thing is also good. Here's an example of something I caught on a student's creative piece once that I've saved over the years. And he wrote the following, and I don't want you to get discouraged. There's something wrong with your audio. I want you to read this in your head first. Now let's read this out loud. Really, I will, and you can listen. Jim looked down. I awoke at 10, he said, and the rain clouds already covered the sky. Now, it's not a bad piece of dialogue, right? It's pretty good. But if you pay attention, truly nobody says, I awoke. We read it, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone use that word in any kind of casual dialogue. Without reading it out loud, we wouldn't catch those words and those types of words that we think fit, when in reality, they just don't. Find those words that sound unnatural when we say them out loud and root them out of your story. That brings us to rule 2. This is actually a tool from Cynthia Whitcomb called the 3-beat rule. And what we do is look for 3 beats, which are sentences or phrases, and split them up to kind of give us a little bit of breathing room in dialogue. Watch how frustrating and unrealistic the following becomes to read. I'm serious. I don't want to go. Jake is so boring. He isn't even fun to talk to. Right? We have 4 beats here. Really, they're pretty uninteresting, all kind of crammed together. It's not bad dialogue, but it uses separation of those beats. Now remember, there's more than one way to do this, but I would do the following if this was my story. I'm serious, Jenny said. Her eyes welled up with tears as she looked out the window. I don't want to go. Jake is so boring. Jenny remembered how much she liked them before their first date, and how he had never called her back. He isn't even fun to talk to. Now we got a better flow here, and it doesn't seem quite so choppy, right? We have a breakup of just the dialogue. It's kind of ironic because really I think we chop it up even more, but that's not important. All right, rule number 3. Look at this smiling guy. This has to do with accents and dialects. Something I used to really love, especially early in my writing career. I loved doing specific characters with different dialects. So just to show you how challenging this can be, here is an excerpt from Their Eyes Were Watching God. I'm going to read it as plainly as I can here so you can get a feel for how difficult this can be to read. I wish my people would get more business in 'em and not spend so much time on foolishness, said Jody. Everybody can't be like you, Jody. Somebody is bound to want to laugh and play, said Janie. Who don't love to laugh and play? So the main complaint about this book is that it's hard to read, and it is. It is very challenging to read. It is realistic dialect and dialogue, but remember, you want people to be able to read what you're writing, right? Outside of it being realistic, you want it to be able to be readable. So let's take a look at Huckleberry Finn quote, something also from the South, and see how much easier it is to read. Now this one I will read out loud. Jim said the bees won't sting idiots, but I didn't believe that because I tried them lots of times myself and they wouldn't sting me. See, we get put in a place of the South with a little Southern twang and folksiness, but we don't have the issues that we have with reading Their Eyes Were Watching God. Something I try and keep in mind for me when I'm doing writing is I'll make purposeful, like small grammatic errors if I want someone to sound uneducated, or if I want someone to sound or think they sound smart, I'll have them use over-the-top vocabulary no one would use to show them it's kind of pompous. By changing those words a little bit, those little tricks, makes the story a little more readable, and then we can also glean a little more characterization. Brings us to Rule 4. Rule 4 is a quick one, real short, and I reviewed it actually in my one about books for writers, and that's keep your dialogue tags simple. Just stick with a very basic, he said, she said, or occasionally, and this is pretty rare that you want to use this, she or he asked. Very, very rarely use yelled, chortled, screamed, sighed, etc. Keep it clean and keep it simple. It's going to be easier for people to read and they'll like it more. Rule number 5. This one can be tough, but you got to cut out that unnecessary dialogue, right? As much as I dislike stories that lack dialogue, I loathe stories with totally unnecessary, nonsensical dialogue. Make sure the dialogue is always driving a story forward. That is extremely important. And here are a few examples of things to steer clear of. So if you see this, cut it out. First, going to be pointless questions and answers that don't add anything or feel boring or monotonous. Get rid of it. Monologues. I cannot stress this enough. In the real world, people don't monologue, right? We generally exchange conversations. After a few sentences tops, we have a person stop talking. I showed how to split it up earlier, and that's really as long as you want to write for one person speaking. Next is going to be unnatural or propped up dialogue. As weird as that sounds, that example I gave earlier, I awoke, is an example. Anything that sounds weird when you read it out loud, cut it out. And remember to ask yourself this big, important question: is this really how people talk? And if not, get rid of it. Anyways, thanks again for stopping by, everyone. I hope you're having fun and learning too. Most importantly, though, keep on writing.